David, thank you so much for joining us today at Testify. I really appreciate it. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. My pleasure to
Yeah.
join you. Yeah,
Okay.
thanks for inviting me.
Great. I'm really looking forward to doing this because we haven't had a composer before. There's so many different art forms out there, and that's what we
Yeah.
aim to explore, you know. So I guess I'm going to get right into it. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a composer? When did you realize that was a vocation for you?
Yeah, good question. So I think I started out as a musician on the piano, um, but a lot of what I did even when I was young was improvising. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of the, I don't think improvisation and composition are the same thing, but there are a lot
Mhm.
of transferable um, processes, skills, techniques. So that was probably my first leaning in that direction, even when I was, in primary school.
Mhm.
Um, when I was in high school, so I moved to the UK from the Bahamas at the end of primary school and started high school in the UK. And as,
Mhm.
as I got into, um, I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the UK system, but GCSE and A level is your top
Mhm.
of your uh, high school over here. So as I was getting towards kind of GCSE and moving into A level, I was doing a lot more, proper composition
Mhm.
and starting to, you know, not just improvise things, but write them down, start to refine things and go over things. Yeah, and then I wrote a piece called The Butterfly, which was when I was 15, 16, which won a prize in the BBC Young Composer of the Year. Um, and at that point, I was like, okay, so maybe this actually has some mileage because it's not just me that's kind of authenticating what I'm doing in terms of composition.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and then at university, my undergrad was in music, but
Mhm.
again the direction was towards composition. So by the third year of my undergrad degree, I was pretty much taking all the courses that were available that were in either composition or performance, and the ones that weren't was kind of supporting those interests.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
So, would you say that your journey into music as a whole, do you think that just is something that you just naturally went toward, or were there people in your life who kind of said, this guy has talent, let me steer him toward that? How would you describe that?
Well, I mean, going back to the Bahamas again, so yeah, there were people. One of whom is your dad, by the way.
That's so
So
true.
the the kind of gospel keyboardist and the
Mhm.
kind of rich, lush chords and some of those movements, that was
Mhm.
always like, huh, I really like the sound of that. What is that? Try and go home and work it out. I mean, I couldn't at that age, but
Yeah.
try. Um, Part of it was my dad. So he's from a very musical family, who I've now all kind of met and spent quite a lot of time with in the UK. Um, so his brother was a concert pianist for many years. Piano concertos with orchestras and this sort of thing.
Mhm.
Um, all of his sisters, uh, sorry, all of both of his sisters are musical.
Uh,
Um, he was in various bands, so yeah, I mean, listening to music in the home was quite normal. Listening to music on the radio was very frequent.
mhm.
Um, Seeing my dad involved in music, with bands, with gospel bands at church, in free time, that was very um, just kind of the air that I breathed really.
Ah.
Um, and then I started piano lessons when I was very young, about age 4. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that there was a time when I had to be compelled to practice. So there are
Yeah.
many hours of my dad's life that just spent making sure I did my half an hour a day. But
Mm,
actually, at quite a young age, it got to the point where I was just doing that independently. And I remember one particular Sunday, um, that I was trying an F sharp major scale, hands together, 4 octaves. You can see how
hmm.
you'll see why I remember that. And
Yeah.
dad was sitting with me, and this might have been the last time he sat with me, and I just kept getting it wrong. I just couldn't get it right perfectly, and
Hmm.
eventually it got. I was just like, you know what? No, I'm going to do this right, and I'm not stopping until I get it right. And
Uh-huh.
dad actually left at one point because he was like, right, just leave him to it because he's obviously going to
Hmm.
go at this. And I stayed there for about another hour and a half. You know,
Really?
when you're 7 or 8, that's quite a big proportion of your life, I guess.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I was like, I am going to get this. So there came a
Wow.
point where, yeah, I had been steered into it, but then I was like, um, yeah, I want to do this myself. So
Okay.
that's an example.
Okay. So it's a little bit of both then. Oh, nice. That's great.
Yeah.
So what genres, I know you do a whole lot of different things. Could you just let us know what kind of genres you currently work in?
I suppose in terms of like genres and styles, it would be classical, jazz, and gospel.
Okay.
Um, so that's the quick answer. But I guess in terms of what I do as a professional musician, are you kind of angling that way as well?
I wasn't, but yes, please let us know.
um, so I mean I make my career from music exclusively, and
Mhm.
um, that's partly because I think it's a vocation.
Mm,
But it's made up of a portfolio basically of there's some teaching at all sorts of levels from primary school to postgraduate.
mhm,
There's performance, there's composition. Um, so yeah, those kind of areas manifest themselves, and those different styles, classical, jazz, and gospel, manifest themselves.
mhm.
Um, in various different ways, and although I do lots of different things, I guess altogether it adds up to probably something like a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. But it only adds up to that. It doesn't work out like that in a week.
Yeah, it didn't sound so. It sounds like your life is very varied. Every day is something
Yeah,
different.
definitely.
Yes, wow. So then, because your career is so varied in what you do every single day, when it comes to actually creating a piece, um, what's your process? Can you describe
Oh,
what that's
that's
like? 'Cause I'm sure that's interesting.
yeah, that's a very important question for me. So I think my compos compositional process used to be pretty
Mm,
much improvise at the piano. Oh, I like the sound of that one. Right, let's try and write that down.
mm,
Um, which, when it worked, was great, but the problem was it didn't work a lot of the time. So the kind of improv and trial and error and notate from that yeah, I found that I had so-called writer's block a lot. I
mhm,
found that
mhm,
um, I because I had quite a uh, quite a high threshold for what I thought would be acceptable. The
Oh,
quality control was
mhm,
always like, oh, that's not good enough, but I couldn't really necessarily work out why. Um,
mhm,
so it was really when I did my PhD in composition. So this is in Manchester. Um, what was that? The early 2000s, and I finished in 2013, something like that. Um, I I I feel like that was the point where I really got some process and some technique and some methodology,
mhm,
um, and just learning things like the, you can actually be taught composition. You can
mhm,
actually um, quantify some of the aspects. It's not all qualitative. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there is a lot of value to be found in working away from the piano. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember with my PhD supervisor, I spent the first year kind of in kind of diagnosis of actually the piano is probably a problem for you. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm an accomplished pianist. I improvise a lot. That's what I use.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, this is weird. But it was good advice. And I spent basically the first year of my PhD learning to write away from the piano, um,
Mm-hmm.
learning to research a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
thoroughly, um, learning to. I know that analysis is sometimes a bit of um, a scary word, and doesn't that stifle creativity, or doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
At least, isn't it the opposite of spontaneity? But I've not actually found that. It's I think both and is much better, and analysis and spontaneity,
Mm-hmm.
kind of working together, have been much more helpful. And just techniques, techniques for extension and development, like
Mm-hmm.
inversion and retrograde and sequence, and
Mm-hmm.
just actually pure repetition and re-instrumentation, reorchestration, um, elision. I'm just off the top of my head, fragmentation, liquidation. All of these sorts of things, which actually are just super, super, super useful, and you can
Mm-hmm.
see them in everything from Beethoven to a Christian song. When
Mm-hmm.
they're good and when they're catchy, you can see these techniques.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that that's the longer answer to the question.
Okay. So then the art of composition then is a marriage, would you say, between um, just the creative, like, oh, I like this sound, I like this process, and um, a, oh, how would I say? I wouldn't say rigorous, but there's an academic kind of portion to it as well, would you say?
Yeah, and I'm happy with the word rigorous. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it's not so much about throwing away that quality control and that desire for. Actually, that sounds really good. That's really grabbing me.
Mm-hmm.
The question is how. What is the best way for me to reliably get there? Because what I was
Mm-hmm.
finding was I'm only getting there 0.5% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
A 95.5%, sorry, maths, goodness me, 99.5% fail rate
Ah,
is that's just I can't work like that.
right.
And I wouldn't say it's gone the other way, but I'd say I'm maybe at a 30% success rate,
Mm-hmm.
and that's quite good, because I don't know, if you spend 3 days composing, that means you're going to get one good day, and actually you can get a lot done if you get one good day. So
Mm-hmm.
it's about, yeah, it's about getting to that point of, yeah, this is really grabbing me, and being able to understand why it's grabbing you, and then being able to actually
Mm-hmm.
replicate that, being able actually to equip other people. So I mean, I said a lot of what I do is education.
Mm-hmm.
um, Being able to essentially fast track younger composers past what I had to go through. So
Ah.
I don't want them to sit there as, young talented composers who have that kind of sense of, what's worthwhile and what's good and what's quality, and they want to write it,
Mm-hmm.
but they've got no way to actually realize their ideas, and make more of them, and they're just, most of the time, they're kind of sitting there and not knowing what to do. I don't want other people to go through that. um,
Mm.
yeah,
Okay.
how do we get them there?
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool. I like that. Um, so I think you've talked a lot about my other question, which was going to be what are the biggest challenges that you have faced as the composer? But do you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, um, I think learning to be less precious about what you write.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, after my undergrad, I did a postgrad, like a single year master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, just learning to throw stuff away, which
Mm-hmm.
wasn't good, and not to not necessarily to obsess and to write quickly. That was a big part of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and learning that actually the feedback of other people, even when it's something that you don't want to hear, when it's something that means you're going to have to go back and work on that bit again, even though you've already been with it. Um, learning that sometimes the thing that you think is quite good, actually, if that's not transferable and it's not also grabbing other people,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to be a little bit careful because maybe they just don't like it. Okay, well, you can take that with a pinch of salt. But I think if they're following that up with, yeah, but it's not working because, and they can
Mm-hmm.
actually, you know, put some flesh on the bones of the critique. I think learning to listen at that point is so valuable because you learn something and actually you probably produce something better out of it, and it's a worthwhile process. It's going to make you a better composer. So
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that's a big challenge. Learning to let go of certain things, and
Yeah.
um, learning that becoming a good composer. I don't really like that term. Becoming a better composer is
Mm-hmm.
really the aim. You're always aiming for better and better and better, and it takes critique to get there. Yeah,
Good.
that's a challenge.
Good. Good stuff. Um, so my next question, because you also work very closely with the church. So I guess some of your stuff is more academic, academic secular, and but you also work a lot in the church. One of the things that I think about when I think about I want to say the Christian music industry, but the music of the church, we have a lot of different styles. But I think that sometimes we get these boxes, right? Particular genres, particular ways of thinking, etc. And I think a lot of what you do is kind of outside of that box. But specifically, the role of the composer in Christian music, music of the church. Could you talk a little bit about that? What do you want your music to accomplish?
It started with genre and style, so I think it would be a good thing for um, a composer to think about pastiche composition.
Could you
Thinking,
describe that a little bit? Because I don't think a lot of us are familiar with the term
yeah,
pastiche.
so pastiche means you're trying to you're consciously, deliberately trying to imitate a particular style. So you could
Ah,
have pastiche composition in the style of Beethoven, or
mm,
in the style of Debussy, or in the style of a hymn. Can you write
mm,
a hymn? And a lot of them is that would be pastiche in the style of Bach chorales. Can you actually do that? That's an important part of the Christian tradition. It's good to have that within your toolkit of things to be able to do.
yeah.
Um, what else is Hillsong? That's
Mm-hmm,
pretty popular. Can you write a song in the style of Hillsong?
mm-hmm,
Choose, go through and see what's popular. Try and work out, okay, what are the 5, 10 most popular genres? Can you actually write consciously, deliberately in those genres? Because what that will teach you is what are the characteristics of those genres? How are they different? What skills am I learning? Um, one of them will be better maybe for melody, one of them will be better for chords, or maybe more deep than that, the interaction between the melody and chords will be different in different
mm-hmm,
genres, or maybe the harmonic language will be different in different genres. um, the relative rhythmic complexity will be different in different genres. Can you actually cover all of those things?
mm-hmm.
Because if you want to be a Christian composer, you don't know what opportunity might present itself. So what you want to be
True.
is ready. And
Mm-hmm,
this gets on, I think, to what I think um, that the role is. The role is to serve the church. So,
mm-hmm,
um, like the New Testament says in lots of places. We all have different giftings.
Mm-hmm.
So if you feel like your vocation is music, and within that you feel like your gifting is composition, well, part of fanning that gift into flame is can you actually cover some of these things um, that have been useful to the church? I mean, if you know, taking hymns and Hillsong as the two examples again, you know,
Mm-hmm.
hymns have been around for hundreds of years. There's got to be something that's valuable to the
Yeah.
sung worship of the church if we're still singing hymns. So,
Mm-hmm.
so actually being able to articulate something musically in that genre is important. When I look at Hillsong on YouTube, you know, we're probably talking tens of millions of views. Um, okay, there
Something
must
people
be
like.
something about that that's valuable to the church. So,
Mm-hmm.
can you actually cover that style? Because you might have something valuable to say in that
Mm-hmm.
style,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe actually you're the only person who's going to say that particular thing. So, um, yeah, so as much as possible, train yourself, equip yourself to be able to fulfill your role in
Mm-hmm.
the church. Um, yeah, I mean, there's loads more I could I could say about that, but yeah, I think the only thing I'd add, sort of immediately, unless you want to follow up and refine the question, is um, I think there's something slightly different about congregational worship, corporate worship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are certain things um, that I'm obliged to consider if
Mm-hmm.
lots of people are going to sing something together. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, well, who are the people? They might be a very diverse age range. They might have a very diverse musical experience and background.
Mm-hmm.
They might have very diverse likes and dislikes. Um, so if they're all going to sing something together,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that you go musically quality wise to the lowest common denominator, but there's got to be something that everybody can get behind. So
Right.
singability, for example,
Mm-hmm.
memorability would be important. And if I was writing an instrumental orchestral piece, I might think about memorability, but
Mm-hmm.
it might not be as high a priority, let's say, as
Mm-hmm.
if I'm doing something for congregational worship, where there might be ages 8 to 80, and
Mm-hmm.
some people, if the rhythm's too complex, they're either not going to be able to sing it, or a different congregational demographic is just going to simplify it, and you're not going to get the complexity that you wrote anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just being prepared for that. Um, yeah,
Okay. So what I take from that is that when you're writing something, you're really looking at the audience, the congregation. You're taking their um like how are they going to use this experience? You know, how are they going to appreciate this experience? You're really writing it for them, you know. Not so much like for the purposes of like, hey, enjoy this, but you know, to use it as an actual tool to accomplish something that everybody can get on, correct?
yeah. I mean, I think I'd agree with your hesitancy to use the word for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that. I don't think that's wrong. I just think it's not complete. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
we're writing for the congregation. Full stop. I
Yeah.
think I think if you're going to use the word for, then you have to put lots of categories after it.
Right.
The first of which would be for the glory of God,
Right.
for example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but but if you're erasing that completely from your theology of musical worship, and the congregation doesn't play a part in it,
Mm-hmm.
um, well, it, is it congregational then? Would be my question.
Very good question. That is a very good question. That's a very serious question, actually. Um, all right. so I guess a little bit off that because we have to wrap up a little bit. But in terms of the art of composition, um, so your goal for music in a Christian space is to, I guess, in a very technical sounding term, develop tools for worship. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely a big part of it. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Any,
Um,
is that the thing, or is there anything else that, you know, like what you want your music to accomplish for people?
uh, yeah, yeah. There are other things, but it
Mhm.
might help if I ground that in terms of like where might I see that in scripture, for example.
Right.
So
Hmm.
um, the Psalms say things like play skillfully. Um,
Mm.
I notice also that in there's this very interesting um, couple of chapters, I think, in 2 Chronicles. I can't remember how many chapters, but a fairly significant amount of space devoted to how King David organizes the musicians. I mean,
Hmm.
there's someone who's in charge because they're the most skillful and they understand best and are best trained. There's a rota,
Hmm.
um, and um, yeah, people have a certain amount of time assigned to it. So um, I think we could also get a sense from the Psalms themselves. Some of them, they're all pieces of art, aren't they? But some of them are things like acrostic poems which start with successive letters of the Hebrew alphabet. There's
Oh.
there's skill in the worship, um,
Hmm.
in terms of your artistic expression. We don't just have
Hmm.
skill for preachers. We don't just have skill for people who cater. We don't just have skill for people who are the finance team in a church.
Hmm.
There should be skill in the music team,
That's
including the
true.
composers.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think theologically to emit excellence um, would be problematic for me because I see that in scripture. But
Yeah.
of course, there should be a lot more than that. What
Hmm.
about grace? Um, so yeah, we want excellence, but if someone plays one wrong note, are we going to come down on them like a ton of bricks?
Mm.
There's got to be grace as well as excellence. Um,
Mm.
what about worship? This should be a vehicle for worship of God. So, are you actually providing, um, for example, ways to prepare the congregation for the hearing of scripture and preaching?
Hmm.
Are you
Hmm.
providing vehicles for them to respond to points that a preacher might draw out? Are you providing vehicles for different seasons of life? Um, Not everything is awful, not everything is joyful, not
Mm.
everything is in between and just kind of a bit mediocre and ordinary life.
Mm.
We need vehicles to um, express the human condition and express praise of God in all
Mm.
sorts of circumstances. So the role of the composer should be to do that. And you I mean, one really practical application is what's the diet of the worship of your local church? Are
Hmm.
there particular issues which are not being addressed in song, and we don't have vehicles for that? Is it all about scripture and there's not really many songs about the spirit?
Mm.
um, is it all about the New Testament and there's no songs that talk about stuff in the Old Testament?
Mm.
You'd be missing out on a lot of stuff there.
True.
So yeah, um, are there songs which rejoice in what older members of the congregation can bring? Are there songs that rejoice in what younger members of the congregation can bring?
Hmm.
If we're going to be a body of Christ, we need vehicles to express thankfulness for both of those things. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Awesome. Okay, so my last question before I wrap up, because this has been really good. This has been very good.
yeah, I'm
Um,
glad.
so I have spent a lot of time thinking about music in general. I know that there is, you know, a Christian music industry. Um, And we see some things sometimes we don't. That's I personally am not pleased by, or I get the sense that commercialism sometimes uh, supersedes authenticity. Um, Sometimes that's maybe it's just, but I just wanted to know along those veins, in Christian music currently, whether it's the industry itself or just just music in the church in general, is there anything that you are concerned about, or is there anything that you are encouraged by?
Yeah, good good questions. I certainly would be concerned about commercialism on its own. Um, I just need to be slightly cautious here because I haven't been, for example, in charge of a music label,
Mhm. Yeah.
um, and I'm not kind of signing people. I don't know what that involves, so I have to speak
Hmm.
a little bit theoretically. But I
Hmm.
think I would, let's put it this way. I think I would be concerned if, um, on the one hand, a Christian label didn't run themselves as a business. It is a business. They
Hmm.
do have staff to pay. They do need to be good at promoting people. They do have to make
Hmm.
decisions about who to
Hmm.
promote and who not to promote. You've got to actually not just be Christian, but if it's a business, it's a Christian business. I
Yeah.
would equally be concerned on the other side if the commercialism takes over,
Hmm.
and um, I don't know if it's just about the formula that works. Okay, we
Hmm.
have this and this is popular and it's kind of easy to put stuff out. Well, great. And actually maybe praise the Lord to a point. But
Hmm.
if that then prevents I was talking about variety in the diet of the church.
Hmm.
If that gets to the point where actually there's topics that we're missing, there's styles that we're missing, there's
Hmm.
talented people who God has given gifts who are not
Hmm.
having the opportunity to um, have their blessing spread out to the maximum number of people because it's just about commercialism. I think that would then become a problem for
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
So again, I I've not been involved in the industry in that way, so I don't know where the sweet spot is where you do both, but it seems godly to me to strive for um, both
Hmm.
sides of that. Um, I suppose I suppose maybe I can speak into what it's like in kind of trying to get into that. And
Hmm.
the fact is, it's hard. I think to an extent, I'm okay with that. I think realistically, if you want to get to the point where you're getting signed and you want tens of millions of people to listen to your music, I think there's a certain amount of, well, manage your expectations, because
Hmm.
if if it's not really good, actually, why should tens of millions of people listen to it? And what's it going
Hmm.
to take to get to the point where you're really good? um,
Hmm.
so I think part of it being difficult should just be the way things are. How could it be otherwise? But I think if it's difficult purely because you've done the work, you're working with integrity, you are um, you're you're pretty sure in terms of like an intersubjective analysis. You've spoken to lots of different kinds of people, and there's broad assent that the music is saying something and it's worthwhile,
Hmm.
and then you don't get signed. I think that kind of difficulty is then not on you, and I think you could have peace about that,
Hmm.
and say, um, well, what are some other ways I might get my music out there if the label
Hmm.
thing is not working for that reason. And I would pray about it. I would seek some wisdom of other other Christians. Um, so yeah, I think there are problems in the Christian music industry, and I think
Mm,
those problems come when we're not thinking about the kind of core aims of what we're trying to do, like
mhm,
providing the church with um, diverse vehicles which you know can glorify God, uh, and in such a way that we're not getting sucked into commercialism, and we're not
mm,
getting sucked into low quality
mm.
on the other hand.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So would you like to add anything else that you would like to say or close out with? But also, do you see anything that encourages you within Christian music today?
Oh yeah, that was the other that was the
Mm-hmm.
other part of the question. Um, I don't know that there's anything extra I want to add. um, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of encouragements. I could maybe give some examples. So one thing I find really encouraging is working with others. I think I've
Mhm.
learnt to co-write over the
Mm,
past 10 years, which has been quite a journey for me. And I talked about being precious about my stuff before. Um, but yeah, co-writing has been quite a yeah, I would say quite a big part of my sanctification actually,
mhm.
as a growing Christian musician. Um,
Yeah.
uh, I think another thing I found encouraging is um, that music seems to be, if you keep putting the time in
Mhm.
and the work in, it keeps seeming to reward you. Um,
Mm,
it's very. I'd be interested to know if that's the experience of others, but it just it um, the use of music in the praise of God seems to be
mhm,
a deep well which I, I haven't found the bottom of yet, and it's
mhm,
quite. I feel like it's quite rare in life to find lots of things where you can keep going deeper and keep going deeper and keep going deeper, and things just keep getting better and keep getting more
mhm,
interesting and keep becoming more compelling and keep becoming more worthwhile. I mean, how
mhm,
many things can you say that of? And I've I found that to be the case um, with music generally,
mhm,
and certainly in particular with music in praise of God. So um, yeah, if that's your if that's your experience as well, um,
mhm,
keep yeah, keep trying to discover deeper depths.
mhm.
And yeah, I hope that's I hope that's not just me.
That is actually a great way to end it because I guess that's partly how you know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. hmm So I think we are out of time because we could go on for hours, I'm sure. But thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Happy to do it again at some point, and yeah, hope hope all your listeners and viewers have found it useful.
I'm sure. Okay. Thanks a lot, David.
All right.